Hey besties, welcome back. Okay, so if you watched my last video, you already know the basics of what is going on with Joseph and Kendra Duggar. But today I have updates that have been coming in fast, and I mean fast, and some of what I'm going to share with you today is going to make your jaw drop, because the situation for the Caldwell family has escalated to a level that I don't think most people are fully grasping yet. We have new confirmed charges. We have a GoFundMe that went up and then disappeared within hours. We have jail calls that reveal exactly how Kendra feels about her own parents. We have property records, asset movement, and a family that is essentially being squeezed out of their home by the very man accused of hurting their child. And I want to walk you through all of it, piece by piece, because there is a very specific and very deliberate sequence of events happening here that you need to understand. Stay to the end, because the last thing I'm going to share with you about what Paul and Christina's legal options actually are and what the Duggars may be doing to block them, that is the part that ties everything together. Let's get into it. So when I last covered this, we were talking about Joseph's arrest in Florida. But since then, this case has expanded enormously, and I need to make sure you have the full picture of where things stand right now. Here is what is confirmed as of today, April 5th, 2026. Joseph Duggar appeared before a Florida judge on March 31st. He was informed of his charges: lewd and lascivious molestation of a child under 12 and lewd and lascivious contact, and he entered a not guilty plea. Bond was set at $600,000. He posted it and flew back to Arkansas that same afternoon. His formal arraignment is scheduled for April 20th in Bay County, Florida. That is the next major court date to watch in the Florida case. But Florida is only half the picture, because separately, in Arkansas, Joseph and Kendra are now both facing 8 additional criminal charges that have nothing to do with the Florida molestation case. 4 counts of second-degree endangering the welfare of a minor, 4 counts of second-degree false imprisonment, both of them. Kendra was taken into custody, booked, and released on a $1,470 bond. Joseph's next appearance on the Arkansas charges is April 29th in Elm Springs District Court. Neither of them has entered a plea on any of the Arkansas counts yet. Now, I know some of you are asking, what are those false imprisonment charges about? Because that detail slipped past a lot of people in the initial wave of reporting. And here is the answer that has come out through investigative reporting. When police investigated the Duggar home in connection with these charges, they reportedly found locks installed on the exterior of bedroom doors, on the outside, meaning someone on the outside of the room could lock children in. I want you to sit with that for a second, because that detail does not land the same way as just reading a charge on a court docket. Locks on the outside of children's bedroom doors. The Tontitown Police Department has said the investigation remains active and ongoing, and that because minors are involved, they will not be releasing further details at this time. But what has come out through the arrest affidavit, through court records, and through verified reporting from outlets including NBC News, CBS News, and the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette paints a very specific picture of what investigators found in that home. And then there is the court order on top of all of this. Joseph Duggar is currently barred by a Florida judge from having any unsupervised contact with any person under the age of 18. That includes his own 4 children. Kendra, as of this reporting, does not currently have custody of the children either. So 4 kids are somewhere without either of their parents, while their father prepares for a molestation arraignment and their mother faces 8 misdemeanor criminal charges. That is the reality of this household right now. Now let's talk about those jail calls, because they are critical to understanding the full dynamic of this story. These calls were obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, meaning they are public record. They were made from the jail while Joseph was in custody prior to posting bond. And what they reveal about Kendra's headspace and about how this family views the Caldwells is honestly chilling once you understand the full context. In the calls, Kendra tells Joseph that the family loves him, that people are sad about what happened, but they love him, that God is going to get them through this. She talks about trusting God, about taking it one day at a time, about looking for the light at the end of the tunnel. There is talk about kings in the Bible, the ones who trusted God and the ones who didn't, and what a difference that made. And there is a comment about reading the King James Version of the Bible, which, as I'll explain in a minute, is actually more loaded than it sounds on the surface. But here is the part I need you to really pay attention to. At one point, Kendra tells Joseph, matter-of-factly, that her family said they are moving out in a month, and that everyone is going to hold them to it. She is talking about her parents, her mother and father, the Caldwells, the family of the child who reported being victimized by her husband. And the way she says it, according to people who have listened to the full recording, is not with grief or sadness or concern for her parents' well-being. It is cold. It is transactional. It is a timeline. And then, in other portions of the call, Joseph and Kendra reportedly discuss the property, the rental income it will generate once the Caldwells are out, the loan they could potentially take out, the possibility of building another home, expanding. There is reportedly laughter. There is reportedly a comment from Kendra suggesting she was not happy with how her family was conducting themselves. And there is a sense, a very clear sense, that the Caldwells' departure from that home is not a crisis to be managed, but a business opportunity to be seized. That call, that conversation, is happening while the Caldwells are living in that house, while they are the parents of the child at the center of this criminal case, while they are scrambling to figure out how to protect themselves and find safe housing. Now, I mentioned the King James Bible comment, and I want to explain why that matters. One person familiar with the situation told me that when Joseph talked about being rooted in the King James Version in that call, they felt that was a specific message, almost like a signal to Jim Bob. Because you have to understand that Jim Bob and the Duggar household operate heavily within the IBLP framework, the Institute in Basic Life Principles, founded by Bill Gothard. The IBLP is not just about the Bible. It has its own literature, its own workbooks, its own curriculum, its own seminars, its own teachings about authority, submission, gender roles, and discipline that go far beyond what you find in any biblical text. Paul Caldwell, who we're going to talk about in depth in a minute, was opposed to all of it. And the feeling was that Joseph was essentially saying, through that comment, that he had been led astray by not having the full IBLP framework reinforced, that he was pointing a finger, subtly, at the Caldwell influence as a reason for where he ended up. Whether that is the correct reading or not, the fact that someone close to this situation interpreted it that way tells you a lot about the theological and political dynamics running underneath this entire story. Okay, let me give you the full picture of Paul and Christina Caldwell, because if you don't have this context, you cannot understand the weight of what is happening to them right now. Paul Caldwell is a pastor. He is an independent fundamentalist Baptist, IFB. His faith is rooted in Scripture, specifically the King James Bible, and he has historically had no interest in the additional layers of IBLP teaching that the Duggars have built their household around. He did not use the IBLP workbooks. He did not follow the ATI homeschool curriculum. He did not embrace the Bill Gothard pamphlets on anger management, on what it means to be a man or a woman, on healing. He went back to the text and stayed there. Paul was once very much inside the Duggar world. He was their pastor. Jim Bob, as an elder of the church, helped provide the Caldwells with subsidized housing, because providing housing to a pastor at a reduced rate is a recognized practice in these fundamentalist Arkansas church communities. He also paid Paul a pastoral salary. Paul's mechanic shop was tied to Duggar property. His entire livelihood, his income, his housing, his professional identity, was wrapped up in his relationship with this family. And then it fell apart because Paul would not do what Jim Bob wanted. He would not incorporate the IBLP teachings into the church. He would not adjust the Bible studies to align with Gothard's framework. He would not let the additional authority structures of the IBLP dictate how he ran his congregation. And Jim Bob, when people don't do what Jim Bob wants, responds by removing everything. He dismantled Paul's church. He cut the income. He turned the community against him. He smeared his reputation. There were also arguments about Jim Bob being dishonest with Paul and with others about what Josh Duggar was actually under investigation for, long before that became public. That deception added a layer of betrayal on top of everything else. And Paul lost it all. Not because he did anything wrong, because he refused to submit. Now fast forward. In July 2021, according to public property records, Joseph and Kendra transferred a home to Paul and Christina Caldwell for $10,000 via a quitclaim deed. It was a 1,540 square foot home in Siloam Springs, Arkansas. The Caldwells moved in. The understanding, at least from their side, was that they were building toward ownership, making payments, putting down roots. Then, in 2025, without apparent warning or communication, county records show that Joseph and Kendra transferred the property back into their own names. The Caldwells went from living in what they believed was becoming their home to discovering they were renters, with no formal protections, in a home legally owned by their son-in-law. And then, in April 2025, Joseph and Kendra filed a plat subdividing the surrounding property into 3 separate parcels. They took out a loan. They put an Airbnb on the land. They were expanding, building a real estate portfolio. While the Caldwells, who were also dealing with Christina's ongoing health issues and the weight of constant medical bills, had no idea that the ground was shifting beneath them. This is the family that Paul is trying to protect right now, not just from physical danger, though that is very real, but from an economic trap that was years in the making, likely before anyone knew what Joseph had done. On April 4th, 2026, just yesterday as I'm recording this, Paul and Christina Caldwell launched a GoFundMe. The goal was set at $24,000. The stated purpose was legal fees and safe housing. Paul wrote that his family was facing a difficult and urgent situation, that they needed legal representation to navigate what was ahead, that finding a safe place to live was essential to their well-being and peace of mind. He asked for anything, a donation, a prayer, a share. He used the word safe or safety 3 separate times in the post. That GoFundMe has already been removed. If you search for it now, you will get a fundraiser not found message. It is gone, though it was still linked in the Caldwell family's Instagram bio as of this recording. Now, why does it matter that it went up and came down so fast? Because it tells you something about the pressure this family is under. Whether that pressure came from inside, from concern about how the post would be received, or from legal advice, or from outside, we don't know yet. But the urgency was real. The word safety appearing 3 times in a short GoFundMe post is not an accident. That is a family communicating, as clearly as they can without naming names or making accusations publicly, that they are afraid. And they have every reason to be. Because right now the Caldwells are living in a house owned by the man accused of molesting their daughter. Think about what that means practically. He holds legal title to the property they sleep in every night. He or his representatives could pursue eviction proceedings. He has the keys. He has access. And even setting aside what Joseph himself might do, his family, the broader Duggar network, and the loyal online community of Duggar supporters who are still only getting partial information about this situation could all become vectors for harassment and intimidation. We have seen this before with the Duggars. When a narrative threatens the family's public image, information gets shaped. People get told a version of events that positions the family as victims of a witch hunt. And well-meaning people who love the Duggars and believe in them can become, without realizing it, tools of retaliation against the actual victims and their families. The Caldwells need to get out of that house. That is the most urgent thing. And they need legal help to do it safely and to protect their daughter's rights in the process. Let me break down the legal landscape for the Caldwells because there are real options here, but they all require resources, and they all become more complicated when the other side has money and lawyers on speed dial. First, and most immediately, the Caldwells can file for an order of protection, a formal no-contact, no-proximity order that would legally bar Joseph from coming anywhere near the victim or the family. In an ordinary situation, you don't always need an attorney for this, but this is not an ordinary situation. The Duggar family, specifically Jim Bob, who has spent decades building a real estate and media enterprise, has the resources to hire aggressive legal representation and make the process as difficult as possible for a family that is, right now, struggling to cover basic housing. A lawyer on the Caldwell side is not a luxury. It is a necessity. Second, a civil lawsuit. In the state of Florida, where the crimes were committed, minors have the right to pursue civil action against their perpetrators. That lawsuit can be filed separately from the criminal case, and critically, it covers things that criminal restitution does not. A criminal conviction can result in restitution for therapy costs, medical expenses, and some lost wages for the family, but it does not cover pain and suffering. A civil lawsuit does. It can also pursue punitive damages, which are separate from compensation, and are designed specifically to punish intentional misconduct. In cases involving the sexual abuse of children, those damages can be significant. And this is where the asset movement in those jail calls becomes extremely important. Because in those recorded conversations, Joseph and Kendra were apparently discussing moving their properties and business assets into entity names, LLCs, company structures, so that they would not be held personally. They talked about moving companies into siblings' names. Now, I am not saying that is illegal on its face, but when you do that in the middle of a criminal case, knowing that a civil lawsuit is a real possibility, legal observers recognize that pattern immediately. It is called asset protection, and when it's done in anticipation of a lawsuit, rather than for legitimate business reasons, it can cross into territory that courts take very seriously. Florida law has specific mechanisms for dealing with fraudulent asset transfers, and a good civil attorney for the Caldwells would almost certainly be looking at that closely. Now, if the Caldwells win a civil judgment, or even if they just file, the Duggar side has every incentive to make this as expensive, slow, and painful as possible. That means motions, appeals, discovery battles, delays, all of which cost money on both sides, but which cost a family with $24,000 in GoFundMe goals infinitely more than they cost a family with Jim Bob's resources behind them. And here is something I want to be very clear about, because I have seen some people online suggesting that the Duggar family's stated support for the victim is genuine. I want to say directly, the Caldwells' situation, being pushed out of their housing on a timetable Kendra described coldly in a jail call, with no apparent concern for their well-being, is not consistent with a family that is supporting the victim behind the scenes. Supporting the victim means supporting the victim's family. It means not laughing about when the Caldwells are moving out. It means not transferring property assets around while your criminal attorney says publicly that your client just wants to be treated fairly. I want to end by talking about Paul Caldwell directly, because I think how you understand him changes how you understand everything else in this story. People who know Paul have described him as someone who, despite holding some strict theological views, and yes, some of them will probably make you roll your eyes, he is a fundamentalist pastor after all, has a calm, grounded demeanor. He is not flashy. He is not performative. He takes his role as a pastor seriously, and he believes that responsibility means honesty, even when it is costly. He has never been the type to handle difficult situations by sweeping them under the rug or deferring to whoever has the most power in the room. That is, notably, the exact opposite of how Jim Bob Duggar operates. People close to the Caldwells have also noted that while Paul holds patriarchal views about the family structure, his wife Christina is, by most accounts, the one who runs the household. And their daughters, particularly the older ones, are described as independent-minded. One of their daughters has lived on her own in an apartment attending college. That kind of independence is not the norm in IBLP-adjacent families, where daughters are often expected to remain under parental authority until they are transferred directly into a husband's authority. The IFB has its own problems. No one is pretending otherwise, but the level of control is not the same. That distinction matters here. Paul is also someone who, according to people familiar with his beliefs, holds a theological position on divorce that differs sharply from the Duggar families. He believes that Scripture provides grounds for divorce in cases of serious sexual sin, and that those grounds are legitimate and do not require a woman to stay. That is relevant because Kendra is his daughter, and while Kendra has not publicly addressed her husband's charges or her own arrest, and while she has shown no public sign of distancing herself from Joseph, her father would not be the one standing in her way if she chose to leave. He would be the one telling her she has both biblical and legal grounds to do so. Paul Caldwell went to the police. He confronted Joseph. He cooperated with detectives. He got a confession, twice, on a monitored call. He did everything right. And the price for doing everything right is that he is currently facing eviction from a home owned by his daughter's alleged abuser, fighting to find legal representation, raising 9 children, including several who are still minors, navigating his wife's health issues, and going up against one of the most well-resourced, legally connected, publicly branded fundamentalist families in America. He did it anyway, because he was not going to handle it in-house. He was not going to protect the institution over his daughter. He was not going to be Jim Bob Duggar. All right, besties, here is where things stand, and here are the dates you need to have on your radar. April 20th, Joseph Duggar's arraignment in Bay County, Florida on the molestation charges. That is his next major court appearance, and that is when we will likely see the formal direction of the Florida case start to take shape. April 29th. Both Joseph and Kendra are due in Elm Springs District Court in Arkansas on the 8 counts of endangering the welfare of a minor and false imprisonment. That court date has gotten far less media attention than the Florida case, but those charges are serious, and what comes out of that appearance could significantly change the overall picture. The Tontitown police have confirmed the investigation remains active. There may be more to come. As for the Caldwells, I will be watching the housing situation, any updates on their legal representation, and whether that GoFundMe reappears in any form. If Paul posts any public updates, I will bring them to you immediately. If this video helped you understand what is actually happening beneath the surface of the headlines, please give it a thumbs up and share it, because the more people understand the full story, the harder it is for it to get buried. Make sure you are subscribed and have the bell turned on so you don't miss the updates when they come, because this case is moving fast. I'll see you next time. Bye, besties.